to the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. 3 pastors usually, but today 2 of us here talking about our love for Jesus, but also, yes, for Bitcoin as well. We're glad to have you here today. Missing Ben today, but still joined by David as well. Ben is in meetings all day today, so you are stuck with just the 2 of us. So we're recording this today on the 22nd of April, which means we are just on the tail end of Easter here. And so as a newly minted sole pastor, meaning I'm the only one here, that means I'm the one who did all of Holy Week, right? So lots of people around me making it happen, but I'm the one who gets up in the service and says, all right, now this is what God says about this thing and what is happening here. And so that was a huge, I'll say it one more time, a huge change from what I've been used to in the last 5 years where I've served. So used to be a part of team of 3, and now I'm the only one. So that being said, though, it was fantastic, great. I mean, there's nothing better than talking about the death and resurrection of Jesus. We lost power here where I live on Easter morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't get turned back on until about 7:15. And so there was 45 minutes before church starts, there's a part of me that was freaking out. How on earth are we going to get this done? What is Easter going to look like without electricity? All those sort of things. But it turned back on just in time. So, so good to celebrate that. So good to remind people of the big capital H, the all capital letters hope, right, that we have because Jesus has defeated sin, death, and the devil. I don't think there's any other day like it on the whole entire calendar. Easter is above the rest as well. So lots of good stuff there. Had some people over for dinner since we're on the opposite end of the country now where my family lives. So not ever fun to be alone on those sort of days. So thankful and grateful for a new community here. So that's kind of what's going on in my world, trying to now answer and ask what is next questions. So what am I supposed to be doing now? Where do we need to go? Big picture stuff. So David, what's going on in your world?
Well, hopefully you'll take a breather. You'll breathe and enjoy. And
David, do you know what they
if
say
rest,
about breathing though, right? You can sleep when you're dead, right? Uh,
well, yeah, sure. But still, take that breather. Yeah, it was Easter here too. Awesome how that works. The world round. It occurs to me we could say on the front end that is. What is unique about Christianity? It is an historic faith in a way that most, if not all, are not. All are historic in this sense, I suppose, that people throughout time and place have hoped in them, put hope in them, taken comfort from, invested time and energy into. They're all historic in that sense, but Christianity is historic in a very particular sense that there is this central claim that God sent his son Christ into the flesh, that he suffered and he died. Nothing too spectacular about those 2 things. But then the third one, that he rose. You can call your shot, as Jesus did. He said he'd go up to Jerusalem and die, and his disciples didn't like it, and they said, may it not be, and they tried working against those purposes. You can call that shot. People can kind of try and keep you from doing it, but that far side of it, where he said he'd take up his life again in 3 days, that's crazy talk. And then he did it, and so Christianity rather, clings on to that piece of history that Christ rose. And if he did not rise from the dead, then our faith is in vain. We should do something else with our Sunday mornings. We should do something else entirely with our lives. But
I
we
shared
believe that
this
he did
weekend
rise.
in worship. I want
Yeah.
this quote: Yaroslav Pelikan. Have you heard this before? That if Christ is risen, nothing else matters. But if he isn't risen, then nothing else matters. I just think it puts it
That's right.
so simply, so beautifully, and so succinctly that I just gotta share that there.
That's right. And so we would even say of Christ's death and resurrection that it's an accomplished work that took time in place in history and time took place rather in time and history. And so you can check it out. So listener, go check that out. You could say Christianity is a proof of work system. If something happened, then it's meaningful. And if this one central thing did not happen, then the whole faith topples like a house of cards. So check it out. As you said, with Yaroslav Pelikan, that If Christ is risen, nothing else matters. And if he is not risen, then nothing else matters. So that's good. Yeah, that was this Sunday afternoon. I went on a trail run with two others from church, where we went up to a little over 9,000 feet on the Pacific Crest Trail and then ran 9.5 miles back down into town, dropped a couple thousand feet. Truly, the trend of dropping a few thousand feet is great. But I'm sore even now. I've hiked it often. I hike it pretty fast, but running is always a different thing for me. And it was a blessing to be with them because I am not good at pacing myself, whether on road or trail. I am just not good at it, Jared, unlike you. So, anyways, that was a great Sunday. And then for the organization I serve, I'm getting ready to head out of town to our spring conference in Bentonville, Arkansas here in a couple days. But yeah, all things have been really good. Then I bring our first son, our second born, but first son of the year home from college then from Phoenix next Sunday. So we're excited to have him home. And then a week later, his older brother. All the kids will be happy to be together again. And
Cool.
then within a week or two, that happy, fresh feeling will wear off and they will begin annoying each other all over
That's right.
again.
And
And
mom and
this
dad
is
won't be so
beautiful
cool
family
and
life.
awesome either anymore, and all those fun
Yeah,
things.
that's right. That's right. So, how about your family? How are you settling into life in Las Vegas?
Yeah, so I would say that we've settled in because we've started to develop somewhat of a routine anyway. That's our sort of marker of settling. That we feel like we know where things are. I'm able to drive some places without a GPS. We know kind of what our favorite stores to go do the regular grocery shopping are. We're still trying to like create connections too, which is kind of crazy. Like yesterday, we were at a like a nature preserve with the principal and his wife where I serve, and their little baby, and we met not one but two couples and their kids who either like serve here in a different context in the LCMS or like are connected, and it was like, what on earth? Like in a city of like 2.5 million, something like that, what are the odds that we run into like two people? And one of them's like a runner too. So like a fellow pastor serving, and it's just like so crazy. So those
Really?
sort of things like
That's
just
amazing.
give me a lot of hope for community, a hope for having sort of people to do life with in a new place, right? You know, the terrifying thing
Good.
everybody does, you move somewhere, you don't know anybody, and you have to rebuild your sort of networks and connections.
Yeah.
So those are really very good interactions yesterday.
Awesome. And how many weeks or months until Townley baby number three is due to make his
Right.
arrival? How many weeks are we talking?
Well, I mean, obviously, whenever he's ready, but the actual due date is not until the end of May. So May 30th
Okay.
is baby's due date.
Holy cow, that's coming up.
Yeah, nah, you know, it's our third, right? So we're not stressed about it because it's so far away, being it's a month and a week. It's
Well,
all good.
Ben and I picked out a gift for Townley baby number three.
Oh,
So,
all right.
and that's all I'll say now is we picked out a gift, and so when baby arrives, and then the gift arrives to you all there, maybe on one of these recordings in the future, you can show the world the gift. And I
That's right.
think those who are dialed into this conversation, I think will enjoy it.
That's awesome.
And don't get too excited, Jared. We're not giving baby Townley his or her, first
I was gonna say you're gonna
Bitcoin. Hold
buy
on.
him
Sorry,
a whole
sorry about that.
Bitcoin. Man, that'd be so generous.
So generous indeed, indeed. So, well, here we are. We're missing Ben, but we'll have fun without him. And then we're pretty dynamic coming up to some of these recordings. Some we know really well far ahead of time. Maybe we have a guest what we're going to be talking about, but some of them are a little bit more dynamic, as was this in the past probably day and then hours leading up till now. But I'm excited about this conversation, Jared. I think you had a good handle though for introducing it. So would you take it away
Yeah,
and give it
absolutely.
to our listeners?
So I think when most people who are either skeptical of Bitcoin or are just dipping their feet into what is it and what they hear about it or have heard about it, one of the complaints or sort of, hey, this is an easy reason for me to dismiss it, is that it has either failed on what it's said to do or that it is useless in itself. And so there's a lot of different ways I think we could address this. So we're going to try and frame our conversation under the guise of how can you use Bitcoin today? So not a promise of tomorrow, right? Not a, hey, in the future, you should be able to do this, or in the future, it will be good for this, which there's a lot of those things that it will be good for in the future as well. But there's also a lot that it's good for today. And so I think both of us are going to share some really practical ways that it's been helpful in our lives too, but then hopefully also explain some different ways in which we've read or heard that other people have used Bitcoin today, right? Not in the future, not just theoretical, but actually presently now in the past as well, been a helpful tool for them in their lives, right? So we talk all the time, or we have, about how Bitcoin is a tool for something, right? That it's not an end to itself, but that it is a tool to be used. And just like that great Luther quote, I love the quote. Martin Luther says we are to look at our tools, and then they're crying out to us to be used in service to our neighbor. And I just love that. And so even Bitcoin itself is a tool to be used and to our neighbor. And so we're going to try and hopefully dissect what that is and what are some real practical ways that we have, that others have used Bitcoin for a tool for themselves, for their family, for their friends, for their community, for the sake of their neighbor. So, David, I'll let you lead us into the first one.
Well, love it. Having framed it like that, then I'm going to give my most shy answer to what's it good for today. Because, and I say shy in this regard, it sounds like I'm breaking the rules, the groundwork you just laid down for us, which was not for tomorrow, but today. But today, I do use Bitcoin for long-term savings. Um, and I watch it today, and I keep every paycheck throwing a little bit more into it. But here's why that's so profound for my wife and I is that we were terrible savers up until Bitcoin. We were absolutely abysmal savers, even worse saviors. If I that was kind of a word fumble, but. And we had probably a few things stacked against us, but we still could have done better. The few things that were stacked against us is like so many young people, we left college as well as seminary with some debt. Not a wild amount of debt, particularly compared to what I see to be national averages, both for, 20, 25 years ago when we were finishing up our schooling, but even maybe more so now, especially for young people leaving. Not a wild amount of debt, but here's the way debt typically works is when we're naive and hopeful, it's easy to take on debt. And then we find out, oh, that really is sort of a weight around your shoulders or around your neck. It really does diminish how far my paycheck goes, all these things. So we had that. We were really blessed. We married younger for my wife than me. She 21, me 25. We got married like so many young people. We were not going to have children for 5 years or something like this, right? I'm not going to say we had it really well thought out. But anyways, 4 months later, we were pregnant with our first. And then we said, oh, I guess we're starting a family. And then we had 4 kids. So we had debt, had 4 kids on a young pastor's salary, and things were tight. There weren't many dollars to go around to begin with, and that's at least one of the reasons why we didn't save. Um, but we were not good savers. We never were until Bitcoin came around, and suddenly we started squirreling away in something that's here's the thing about Bitcoin that I love. People will say to me, "But is it liquid? If I have Bitcoin, can I cash it out quick? Can I use it?" We'll talk actually a little bit more about that in this particular recording. But here's the wonderful thing that I found that first of all, the answer is yes. But just the fact that it's different and it's in a different place than our savings and our checking really proved a tremendous help to me and to us. That we became disciplined in squirreling a little bit away. It's in a slightly different place. And over the 6 years that we've been doing that, it's made a tremendous impact on the way we look at the future because of the savings we've been able to accomplish today. So that'd be my first answer is actually savings. But I suppose that's also brought us some security today, though, as well, Jared. In an emergency, we have it there, and it's not so set apart that we would be unwilling to use it on a day like that. We would happily use it and really give thanks to God that He allowed us to use that vehicle to save, to be able to take care of present needs, even. So I'll stop there and give it over to you.
Right. And hey, I think you can say you're using it today for tomorrow. So you're not outside the framework at all, right? Uh, Long-term savings is something that we need to do today for the sake of tomorrow as well.
Yeah.
I want to point a little bit back to what we talked about last episode with Jim, because I'm still his words and his thoughts about how and why to save are just they've really echoed around in my mind and my brain a lot, right? That I'm not doing this for a dollar value, right? So I'm not looking. I think the most recent article I'd read was everybody thinks they need now like $2 million, I think, or something like that to retire comfortably, whatever that is. But I'm not looking to get a number as much as I'm looking to do and accomplish goals, visions, purpose, and things like that. And so for me, when I think about what good is this for, there's two things that it's allowed me, us, and my family to do. So one of them is to save, kind of like you mentioned, save for emergencies. So I'll be honest here and share this, that we have saved. When it was going down a while ago, I would occasionally take our emergency fund and buy Bitcoin with that US dollars, right? And so I was getting 2%, 3% interest, but then I would take a little bit of that and buy Bitcoin with it. And I'm sure some of you are freaking out and saying, hey, why would you do that? That's your dollars that you need to have in the case of an emergency. Why would you put yourself at risk for all those sort of things? But let me sort of bring you up to speed or where things are today. So part of the reason I did that is because of the way in which Bitcoin does protect my purchasing power over time. And so you think about Emily and I have been married for 7 years in June, and the amount of purchasing power that emergency fund that we had 7 years ago compared to today, you don't have to be an economist to know that that it's a lot less, right? You don't have to be in the world of finance to know your money isn't going as far. And so unless you are to be continually pouring resources into that emergency fund to grow it, to keep it up to whatever Dave Ramsey says you're supposed to have, right? That then you're going to actually not have as much for your emergency fund. And that's not the whole goal or point of those things. And so as we bought and exchanged, right, US dollars for Bitcoin, now obviously the price has gone up substantially since then. And so our emergency fund has also grown along with that. And so because of that, moving is very expensive, right? So I mean, our church here graciously covered a lot of our moving expenses, but they're not going to pay for my security deposit on my rental. They're not going to pay for my first half-month rent that like I barely was in the house, and then the rent for the next month that's then due at that end of that month that I just paid for the first month for. They're not going to pay for me to restock my pantry because we moved across the country. They're not going to pay for my registration, which in Nevada is a lot more than Pennsylvania, right? So $45 in Pennsylvania, $500 for our van in Nevada. They're not going to pay for all the other weird things that I need to buy now because I'm living in the desert. And so we were at a cash shortage, right? So we needed to find something to help us zero out our budget at the end of the month. And so in those moments, right, you freak out maybe. You say, I don't know what happened. Why is this way? You know, we keep a very strict budget. We have envelopes, all those sort of things. But we were short on cash. And if I had not have had my Bitcoin, I would have had to do something, would have had to sell something to be able to pay off our credit card bills at the end of the month, right? And so because of that, because of saving in Bitcoin over time, we cashed out what would have been probably half of our entire emergency fund to sort of zero out our budget. But because Bitcoin is where it is and because of the tool that it is, I didn't do the actual math, but I'm pretty sure it's less than like 20% of what we actually cashed out. And I texted David and Ben this. There's a little bit of like shame that I felt in doing that, because in Bitcoin world, Michael Saylor and now even the president of the United States has said never sell your Bitcoins, right? And I could understand that. I get it, right? Did I sacrifice potential gain in the future? Yeah, absolutely I did. Uh, if Bitcoin goes to $2 million, well, there'll be a part of me that says I sold, I don't know, whatever it is, amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin, maybe. Sure, of course, I might be a little sad. But you also know what? I was able to not have to freak out about this and not have to go get a loan somewhere and not have to ask my parents for money and say, hey, can you help me pay my bills? Because, I can't this month. And it was a tool to help me do those things. And so as much as it was not fun to sell some Bitcoin, as much as it was not fun to, sell it and now it's up, probably $9,000, $10,000 per one of those coins since I did that, I also still feel pretty good about it. Like I made the right decision in that moment. And it was for me a helpful tool that has now, and the rest of it is still in Bitcoin, right? So I didn't sell all of it. And so my purchasing power is still protected and is even still growing, even though I've sold some of it as well. And so that's just a super practical, super real thing that I have done for that. And so, yes, of course, right, not financial advice. If you're going to do that, I would not recommend you just hit buy, right, all at one time, but that you want to sort of do a dollar cost average. That's the best way to do it. But that was a thing that I did that was very helpful and really has benefited and served my family, right? So the other reason we do this, and I'll throw it back to you, David, is that my wife stays home with our kids. And I'm truly convinced that Bitcoin is the part of the reason and way that we're able to do that and not be super afraid about the future, right? Because I know that as long as we're able to save and put a little bit of this away, both for those emergencies, but also for the future, for kids, for a house someday, all those sort of things, that it's going to probably do more and better than if my wife was doing the grind, right? If she was working, because instead of sacrificing that time for the future retirement, for a future house, we have had the opportunity and the blessing to have her with our kids. And that's something that I would never trade and that she would never trade in the world. You get 18 years with them forced somewhat to be in your house. And we want to make the best of those as well. And so Bitcoin's been a tool for us to help live into that value of being with and present in our child's lives as much as we possibly can while they're that super impressionable young age. And maybe I don't want them to be exactly like me because that would be terrifying. But I do want to impress upon them the important things, right? Of following Jesus, of what, you talk about this, David, maybe more, but like, what is the world and how do I look at the world? And what are the things that I need to talk about with the kids to be able to then send them out into the world, to be prepared to be good citizens, to be good stewards of what God has given to them, that Bitcoin has allowed us to have that opportunity to do that as well.
Phenomenal. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think given enough time, Jared, it'll be natural for Ben and I both to come to you and say, oh my goodness, something big came up. And we also dipped into it. Yeah. I mean, my long-term savings has allowed me, in one sense, to have emergency funds essentially enveloped in there to where it's not a standalone emergency fund that somehow where we tried to aim for X many number of dollars and then it got topped out at X many dollars. And then, like you said, maybe 5 years later, it's still X many dollars, but that doesn't go as far, right? We've been able to, I suppose, start with some long-term savings, thinking of it all as emergency, aspire to now things in the future with those savings, but also understand that those savings are there for the day of need. Yeah, because apart from that, you're sort of like a lonely dragon underneath a mountain, just laying on top of your gold, right?
Right.
And that's a pretty lonely life, pretty selfish life,
Well,
and it's a view towards one's belly and not towards one's neighbor in the moment. So I'm totally with you.
Jesus has some pretty harsh things to say about people who pile up in their storehouses and say, eat,
Hmm.
drink, be happy because you're taken care of. So one of those
Yeah.
warnings of him as well.
Yeah. Well, my other one then plays off of that. I actually, new to me in the last year and a half, or coming on 2 years, is I use now Bitcoin for some medium term savings with some very specific goals in mind. Like you said, not financial advice, nor is this a playbook, maybe necessarily, but I can explain to you and to our listeners what I've done. And that's this. With our mortgage, it just turns out that our property taxes paid to the county of San Bernardino County, California, are not escrowed into our mortgage. So I have to, on the side, we have to save up the cash for our property taxes and then twice a year pay approximately 50% each of those twice a year bills for 100% of our property taxes. So I can save up in cash, but it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago where I realized in my education journey with Bitcoin that we've talked about it before. Bitcoin is on a 4 year cycle. Every 4 years, there is a halving of the reward, or you could call it the subsidy, for the person or the individual or the company who successfully mines the next block of Bitcoin. Again, those blocks are mined on average every 10 minutes. But again, every 4 years, or approximately 4 years, that subsidy, that reward gets cut in half. And so we call that the halving, or as Bitcoiners do, they love kind of tweaking these words, and they've called it sometimes the halvening. But that takes place. In fact, the last halving took place just a full year ago. So if it takes place every 4 years, then we're a quarter of the way to the next time that happens. And then you look at the price action, the purchasing power of Bitcoin in US dollars over its whole lifetime of 16 years, and you can see a 4 year pattern emerge that about starting 12 months after the halving through to 18 months after the halving is the sharpest increase, the sharpest incline of the value of Bitcoin in its yearly cycle. And at some point it goes up and typically hits kind of a frothy, they call it a blow off top, and then it comes back down again. But when it comes down, it never goes down as low as it did in the prior 4 years cycle. And so paying attention to this, I thought to myself, talked with my wife, even talked with you guys when I was beginning this, or maybe I had just begun it when we began talking. My goodness, I still want to be able to cover my bills with cash. So hopefully I have, some amount of cash on hand to do it. But boy, if I know where I'm at in the 4 year cycle, then I'm generally in the half of the cycle where the price action of Bitcoin over the course of weeks and months goes up and up. And sometimes it's down day by day, but on the whole, that it's going up and up, then I could save my property taxes, which is what I do a little bit out of every paycheck, an equal amount of every paycheck, so that over the course of the year I have the cash on hand to pay those. What if I save that in Bitcoin? And then, 6 months from now, when it comes time to pay that again, the value of that Bitcoin has appreciated such that I can sell a portion of it now, not the whole of it. I didn't save dollar, 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 and then spend all those dollars on property taxes, but I saved Bitcoin, Bitcoin, and I get to the point where now I need to spend on the Bitcoin. And just like you described with your emergency fund, this fund has now increased, in fact, over the value of my property tax bill. And so now I only have to liquidate a portion of my Bitcoin. My property tax is satisfied. Even with short-term capital gains, I'm paying attention to that. It's satisfied. And what am I left with? I'm left with Bitcoin after the fact. I could have saved the dollars and spent dollars. I would have been X many dollars in, X many dollars out. But in this case, paying attention to where I'm at in the cycle, I'm saving those dollars in Bitcoin, only having to spend a portion of it, and then having Bitcoin left over. It's like a cheat code, you could say, to if you're willing to try it and you know where you're at in the market, it's a cheat code to saving Bitcoin. Saving Bitcoin, or the other way that I've thought about it as well is it's a coupon, a giant coupon on my property taxes. And how fun is that? Has anybody ever handed you a coupon on your taxes, whether to the federal government, state government, or county government? To me, nobody handed it to me, but I found out a way to achieve this coupon, so to speak, and I've enjoyed that. Now, we have a friend, we have a guest that was on the show not long ago, who when I shared it with him, he leaned in and he was adamantly against it, Jared. He thought anytime you spend any of that Bitcoin is a mistake because of its future. And that is one take on it, and that's fine. Um, but again, we've talked about this from the very beginning, as you said today. It's a tool, and tools are to be in service of neighbors. They're not to be necessarily behind, showcase doors, right? All polished up. As nice as that sounds, they're supposed to be in service. So, long-term savings, none of these are really maybe sexy, but near-term savings or mid-term savings, that's another use case in the Ruffner house for Bitcoin. But to be clear, sometime probably in the next 12 months, I will stop rotating that cash into Bitcoin because I'll know where we're at in the cycle, and I'll just keep rotating keep that same amount of cash in savings to be able to pay out my property taxes. So, near-term savings, but since I need to liquidate it in less than 4 years, like the 4-year cycle, Jared, there will come a point, and I'll probably share on the podcast as well. Yeah, I think we're in the downturn. I think we're in 2 years of lull or just chopping sideways, such that I'm just going to be saving my property taxes in cash for a little while longer.
And I'm sure that some people think we're crazy, but I think, again, the point, right, is that it's a real tool to use, not just for like when I'm 60 and want to retire. And not even, I think it's important to sort of draw the line here too. This isn't like a speculative sort of thing either, right? So it's not, we're not playing the, hey, I think it's going to go up 10% in the next day and then I'll cash it out. Bitcoin is a store of value, not just years, perhaps months as well. And so we're using it in that way too. So, I mean, I've heard people that do a similar thing, that they every month when they get paid, right, twice a month or whatever it is, and they just buy Bitcoin whenever they get that. And then at the end of the month, they cash out, and whatever cash they need, they do that. And that's, your own boat, your own decisions, but that's too much for me. So I feel like it's healthy for our listeners to know that I'm not. Oh, I won't say that I'm not that crazy, but that there is like some sort of thinking and process that goes into these sort of things, right? So risk is not necessarily reality as much as it is just trying to control your own emotions and what is happening around you in that way. And so everybody has their own tolerance, ability, all those sort of things to stomach what is and what could be too. So I think for me, what comes next, and hopefully I won't steal this one. I'm going to. I'll say it that way.
Oh, you go for it.
I would say that Bitcoin has been education, is how you said it earlier, and maybe even a push, if you will, or a pull, probably the better word, right? So we learn the best when we are passionate about something or when we find something interesting, when we are pulled in, if you will. It's not usually the best if a teacher is having to push us to go learn something. Go read your books, go do this homework, go do that. We're not going to be as motivated or as excited about it. But Bitcoin has been a very big pull that I've just kept pulling the cord on, pulling the string on. And it's amazing how long that string is, right? How long the rope is and how many different things are on that rope as I'm pulling it. And so for myself, at least, if you would have asked me what is money 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I never could have probably given you anything other than it's something you use to buy stuff with, right? Or that I want more of it, or, you need a lot of it, or it makes the world go round. But now I can talk about what makes money and what's a good money and what's a bad money and what should you be looking for in money. I think about the ways in which Bitcoin has taught me about electricity, right? So I'm, again, why would I need to know about electricity? I don't, right? I turn my light switch on and it works. And when the power goes off, I know someone magical somewhere will fix it and it'll just start working again. But now I know a little bit about grid and what a grid load is and how they are peaker plants that come on when there's too much load on the grid, right? There's too many people using power, and how renewable energy is great, but how there's often not a buyer of that renewable energy, especially when it's usually at its peak, right? Sun is normally, the sun is at the highest point when people are usually at work, not when they're home using their air conditions, stuff like that. And so I've learned so much, right? It pulls you and it does push you sometimes to learn more because it's such a different world. I don't know if I would say so much as it's a world view. I think some people might push that far and say it's a different worldview. But as a follower of Jesus, I have to say Jesus is my worldview, right? And he is the way I see literally everything. But within that, there is a lot of different things we can think about as well. And so part of the thing that Bitcoin does is it teaches you and it pulls you in, because there seem to be a certain amount of, call them values, core values, or certain things that are alongside of Bitcoin that you just start to learn about. You start to become engaged with, that you start to rub shoulders with these sorts of people who think about these sorts of things. And so it really teaches you a lot about that. And I think there's some interesting thoughts, or at least I have thought, about what does that look like in a world where Bitcoin is much more adopted than it is today, right? When people more than just have heard about it, but use it maybe a day, David, when everyone uses it as long-term savings, right? That everybody's retirement account has a 2% allocation or a 5% allocation to it. That I wonder if those things will change, right? So I wonder how much of those Bitcoin core values are associated with Bitcoin itself, or just the people who would be somewhat considered earlier adopters around Bitcoin. And then in the future, how those will change. Because I think some of them are very closely connected. Some of them are intricately sort of woven together. But I do think some of those are sort of fringe, right? And that over time, the very core essence of what it is and the way in which it pulls you will sort of rise to the surface as well. So Bitcoin, at least for me personally, has been an educational journey for myself. I don't know if I could really say it's been as much for my wife or for my kids. Zoe still does sing that song, when money is controlled, money is corrupted. So she'll still sometimes burst out and start singing that. But at 3, almost 4 years old, I try and say, hey, Zoe, can you say Bitcoin? And if she says Bitcoin, that's education at a 3 and a 4-year-old level. So have you had any more experience with education? I mean, you have older
Yeah.
kids, so.
Yeah, I would definitely. In fact, we tried getting my oldest on the podcast today. He had excuses though. He said he's studying for finals.
I like that's
I guess that's
important.
important. Yeah, yeah, but kind of to do that very thing, and I'd still like to do that in a future episode. Maybe me introduce him, but put him into the hands of you and Ben to then ask him some questions, just to see how much is there. But yeah, absolutely, personal education. I really like the way you said you kept pulling on this cord or the string, and it was long, and there's lots of things on it. So that's a really great physical description of exactly how long is this thing. It keeps going. Um, but I would say not only many things on it. Another way to think of that long cord is it's a thread through many things, and that's not really any different than what you said. But for me, that's part of my education. Is I probably thought of money as that which I wanted more of, that which the government does some stuff with. I just didn't think much more of it than that. I can now see how U.S. and world fiscal and monetary policy, quite frankly, trickles all the way down to affecting the way each generation approaches adulthood, its fears, its hopes, it's how it feels about the generations that went prior, how I feel about the baby boomers, how the millennial and X and Z's might feel about me. I'm sorry, Z's might feel about me and X. I can see, can begin to see some of the relationships of that. I used to, it's connected with history. I used to say, so Rome fell, huh? How does a nation go about doing that? And then literally, as I look at American politics over the last 5 to 10 years, I say, There's some of the connection points, but each of those connection points is kind of the point of connection is woven together often by the thread of monetary and fiscal policy. So it's been a real personal great education. I think my wife maybe I'd call her she seems disinterested. Then every once in a while, I'm like, she asks a question or want to have a conversation where I'm thinking, oh, she has been listening, you know? I just think I have more of an appetite for it on the day to day than she does. She has to, you know, she's got many other things on her mind for the sustaining of the household and for the care of all kinds of people and largely entrust it to my care. But she's interested. But to the kids, yeah, I'll be interested in the years to come, Jared, what that does look like with your children as they grow. Mine are indeed older. I started with them a lot later. Let's see, if it was 6 years ago, then my youngest was probably 8 or 9 when I first really started going into Bitcoin. And
Sure.
the oldest at that same time was, let's call it 15, and is now a junior in college, is 21 years old. And so just naturally already different conversations are happening at that point. But when I was a teenager, did not have conversations with my parents about world history, about other nations, states, or even civilizations in the past that once were strong and now are just simply vanished and gone. And some of the reasons why that might be, how history repeats itself, how we too are coin clipping now as a nation, the world over and as a nation, how inflation works. I didn't know any of that. And my kids are decently well versed in it, which I find to be a fun thing, a fun thing, a very heartening thing. Now, they inevitably will raise their own families and talk with their children about those things that their dear old dad and mom failed to talk with them about. So there's always a repeating of that every generation. But Bitcoin has been not only an education for me, but for the family as well. Coming home from a baseball game last night with son number 3, did a really good job in said game. It was far away. That's what happens when you live on a mountain in California. You can have games middle of the week that are 2 hours from home. Well, we're driving home. We're sort of done talking. I pop on a Bitcoin podcast. I think he's tuned out. And before you know it, I can't finish the podcast because he's asking me now a lot of questions. Great questions. Like questions where he's truly seeking answers, which is to say he doesn't know it all because who does?
Sure.
But quite frankly, highly informed questions. And it was just a lot of fun. It ate
Cool.
up the rest of our time home, kept both of us awake, and was really great. But yeah, I join you. Education was my third one as well. Well, I'm going to go to the fourth one, which I think goes on the back of education really nicely. Having been educated as I have through the lens of Bitcoin, in terms of what I'll just categorically say is the abuse of the US dollar. Absolutely. The abuse of the US dollar. Um, to the detriment of average citizens like you and me. Many people like us, many people who make more than us, many people who make much less than us, but nevertheless, the abuse of the dollar has helped me then, has given me a way not to just be disgruntled about that, Jared, but to take a stand of sorts. I don't consider myself maybe the type of person who day to day is looking to go out into the world and take a stand. You know, I'm not always looking for my revolution, but sometimes a revolution sort of finds you, and you're just going to fall one way or another. And I can talk to you about exchanging dollars for Bitcoin as a way for long-term savings, short-term savings. And both of those are true, but it is also it is not wrong to say that I am well aware that I'm taking a stand of sorts with a lot of people throughout the world, um, taking a stand for my family, but essentially taking a stand against the US dollar. And somebody could come back and say, are you rooting for the demise of the US dollar? Are you rooting for the demise then of this nation? And the answer to both of those is a categorical no. But rather, I think the past and present and persistent actions of our political class, basically, they've been tempted into abusing the dollar, and having done so, they've almost got no choice but to continue to abuse it at a faster and deeper rate than ever before in the near future. And we're likely to see that in the coming months and years. Um, Seeing that that is taking place, I'm not just going to go along with it. I'm going to take somewhat of a stand. I'm going to take a stand and tell the people I love about it, and invite them to kind of come take a stand with me, which I know at times makes me sound a little odd or even crazy, different. But it would be ultimately, I think, unloving of me to not kind of share that with the people I know and love. And by the way, I've done a terrible, lousy job of orange pilling the same group of people. There's been a couple of them that are dipping their toes in now, here and there, and I love that. But I'm willing at times, to a certain degree, to be to be the crazy guy in the room. I mean, there's a certain group of friends when we get together. I will not bring up Bitcoin, but before you know it, one of them's like with Bitcoin, Dave, right? They almost bring it up for me as if I'm the one always bringing it up. And sometimes because that's become our inner joke, sometimes I will preemptively bring it up with like a wink. But off to the side, I'm like, seriously, if you want to talk about this, let's talk soon. So I'm educated about how sick the dollar is. I'm educated about another tool, and I'm willing to take a stand and talk about that stand with the ultimate hope, Jared. Quite frankly, that some reform will take place within the U.S. government and amongst essentially all the nations of the world. That'll be a painful transition from a money that they've been free to abuse to a sound money where they're not in a position to abuse. That's like coming off of a drug, I would imagine. It'll be a painful full transition for them, but ultimately, it's what I am hopeful for.
I love the way that you frame that, right? So we've talked a little bit about the why we call it the Reformation podcast, right? So Tira Meester, I think, was on what Bitcoin did, talking about revolution versus reformation, right? And so I love that. It's hey, it feels like a revolution, but at the same time, we're not calling for like war or violence. Like ultimately, if the dollar was to go away tomorrow and Bitcoin to replace that, the world would be a horrendous mess. And I mean, it's just not. That's a future thing. It's not ready for that, right? And so, in some ways, we don't want that because we want to make sure that if this is where it is going, then we got to build for that sort of stuff to happen, and make ready the rails and the things to do so that then the world can use this for its currency, for its reserve asset, all those sort of things. But I also do love the way in which you are staking a claim, because I think today's world, at least myself, we don't necessarily always want to do that. We want to make sure we keep everybody happy. We don't want to step on too many toes. We want to be the most inclusive, right? I at least follow a God who is pretty exclusive in some ways, right? Jesus said, I am the way to the Father, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But at the same time, invites everybody along with him. Right? So anybody can come to him. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, your sex, your religion. You can come to Jesus. And in some ways, that's the kind of invitation Bitcoin has, right? Not that it's a salvation invitation, but that it's hey, anybody can do this, but this is the only thing. This is the best currency, the best savings, the best tool there is. And you can keep using those other things if you'd like, but this is it, and it's open and free and available to anyone to do that. And I think we have a lot to learn, both as a church, but also just as people, about the power of invitation, right? So we sort of focus a lot on commands and directives. I find myself telling my kids all the time, do this now, right? Come on, I'm getting angry because you're not doing what I want you to do right now. And a lot of times what works is flipping that into, hey, come here, come, let's do this together, right? Let's invite you to come join me. And it's a real subtle change, but I think it really does benefit us because it allows other people to sort of see themselves as the agent of that change. I love the way that you frame that, right? So we've talked a little bit about the why we call it the Reformation podcast, right? So Tira Meester, I think, was on what Bitcoin did, talking about revolution versus reformation, right? And so I love that. It's hey, it feels like a revolution, but at the same time, We're not calling for like war or violence. Like ultimately, if the dollar was to go away tomorrow and Bitcoin to replace that, the world would be a horrendous mess. And I mean, it's just not. That's a future thing. It's not ready for that, right? And so, in some ways, we don't want that because we want to make sure that if this is where it is going, then we got to build for that sort of stuff to happen, and make ready the rails and the things to do so that then the world can use this for its currency, for its reserve asset, all those sort of things. But I also do love the way in which you are staking a claim, because I think today's world, at least myself, we don't necessarily always want to do that. We want to make sure we keep everybody happy. We don't want to step on too many toes. We want to be the most inclusive, right? I at least follow a God who is pretty exclusive in some ways, right? Jesus said, I am the way to the Father, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But at the same time, invites everybody along with him. Right? So anybody can come to him. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, your sex, your religion. You can come to Jesus. And in some ways, that's the kind of invitation Bitcoin has, right? Not that it's a salvation invitation, but that it's a, hey, anybody can do this, but this is the only thing. This is the best currency, the best savings, the best tool there is. And you can keep using those other things if you'd like, but this is it, and it's open and free and available to anyone to do that. And I think we have a lot to learn, both as a church, but also just as people, about the power of invitation, right? So we sort of focus a lot on commands and directives. I find myself telling my kids all the time, do this now, right? Come on, I'm getting angry because you're not doing what I want you to do right now. And a lot of times what works is flipping that into, hey, come here, let's do this together, right? Let's invite you to come join me. And it's a real subtle change, but I think it really does benefit us because it allows other people to sort of see themselves as the agent of that change, right? It allows them to be in the driver's seat, to sort of, like you said, dip their feet in when they feel comfortable, when they feel ready. Not necessarily being forced to by somebody else too. So great words. This will be my last one, I think. So for me, my last one that I would say, and I think I've said this on all the other times we talked about what good is Bitcoin for. I think I'd say it this way, that it's freedom technology is how some people call it, but I'm not going to use it in the way that maybe people normally do. So in the Bitcoin space, right, we say, hey, it's freedom technology. Anybody can do it. You're outside of government control. Usually it's kind of a stick it to the man, if you will. But the work of Alex Gladstein, right, has shown that Bitcoin is freedom technology for those who are ruled over and who live under oppressive governments and authorities and social structures as well. And that is still something that I think is a greatly underappreciated use of Bitcoin today, especially by us Western people who largely have all of our economic freedoms and abilities too, right? You can mostly open a bank account as you desire. Credit card companies are pretty open and acceptable of you and excited to have you on their rolls, but that is not the case for many people. And so the ability to have a cell phone and to have Bitcoin sent to that phone, for you to have your own bank account, if you will, even outside the purview of some authoritative government, on some sort of party that is ruling, is to me one of the most powerful things that around the world Bitcoin helps people do. And so, yes, of course, I have somebody I listen to in the back of my head that a lot of these countries want the dollar. Right. So they don't want Bitcoin. They don't want to save in Bitcoin. They want to save in the dollar because that's better than their local currency, which is true and which is right. But at the end of the day, too, even that dollar, whatever, if it's Tether or USDC, is still controlled by some sort of organization. That's still a centralized thing. And so, while that might work for now, right, for them, while that might be a good thing for them if they can find access to it on their phone, all those sort of things, the only truly uncensored, truly uncontrollable thing is Bitcoin itself. And so for me, it's such a hope for people to be able to have that tool at their disposal, and then to actually be able to use it as they live, as they try and get out of those things, and as they just try and live as people, right? So love of neighbor, Bitcoin, a tool of love for neighbor, especially helps those who are lesser privileged than ourselves, who don't have the same sort of gifts that we have here in the United States as people too. So that's where I'll close my what good is Bitcoin for today.
Awesome. I think my final one dovetailed really nicely with that, and might even just be a subspecies of it. You said freedom technology, but you did use the word hope, and I would say that I would say, what is Bitcoin good for? It's good for a disposition of hope. Now, we truly started this episode talking about Easter, the resurrection of Christ. I think in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul says, if Christ has not been raised, then we are of all people most to be pitied, for our faith is in vain. And if there is a God, then we're found to be misrepresenting him. So we're in bad straits if Christ is not raised and has not been raised and is not living. But indeed he has. So we have not just kind of a wishful pie in the sky hope, but we have a certain hope anchored in the resurrection of Christ. So that makes us hopeful people. As Christians, what does that mean to be hopeful people? Well, we know really near term, like it's valuable to have neighbors and serve them. And then we have this ultimate hope. And there's a lot in between those two that's not very clear to our eyesight, but we are a people of hope, and it's a certain hope as Christian people. Well, I really enjoy Bitcoin also because of that hope word. It's not an ultimate hope by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a horizontal hope for mankind, I would say. And mankind can be a squishy word because how do I exactly conceive of 8 billion plus people? I just don't do a good job of it, Jared. I like you. I do appreciate the freedom technology when I hear about people in other places, and I want more and more of that for them. I'll be honest though, my day-to-day life, my day-to-day calling doesn't have me serving those people most days of the year,
Right.
right? But the people it does have me serving, to have a horizontal human kind of a mankind hope that could be attached to people who I name by name, who I hug, who I forgive, who forgive me, which is to say, certainly my family, friends here in town, my church family here in town. It's a wonderful thing. Now I'm able to have these conversations with my family like none other, and I'll just say that it makes me very hopeful, puts me in a hopeful disposition or hopeful posture for my kids. The house we're living in, I'm looking at out the window here of my office. Um, Even if my son were to graduate from college and have my salary year one, which he won't, he could not afford this house. If I were to move to Big Bear, California, afresh right now and need to buy a home, I could not afford this home because of how inflation has inflated the prices of homes here in California and across many parts of the nation. Jared, I think you know that well right now, right? And the idea of saving up enough cash to get a good down payment is a hard thing. Anybody who knows enough about how inflation is eroding cash savings knows that that's a bad thing to do. So what does one do? And a lot of people don't get beyond the question. They shake their heads and they grumble and they walk away and they don't think about it. But in my hopeful posture that Bitcoin has afforded me, it has me hopeful for my kids and generations to come, even in American life, that they can actually meaningfully save. I'm of the age when I talk about meaningfully saving, it is for things like hopefully retirement someday, maybe travel, most certainly helping my kids out. But that power of saving isn't just for a 40-year-old guy who suddenly has a little bit of cash to do it, but it could be for the 22-year-old, my son, a year from now, graduating, getting his first job, where he wants to think some long-term thoughts. He's now has a vehicle where I can encourage him to do that, and he can see the power of doing it, how it could impact. his life with a future spouse, their life with future children, and with future neighbors. I love that, Jared. I love that. I love that I know what my ultimate hope is, but I love also that in raising kids in this day and age, that I don't have to be a nihilist, right? Where all is lost. There is no hope. Good luck, kids. Mom and I are going to fend for ourselves because that's what we had to do. You're just going to have to fend for yourselves. I don't know what that looks like for you, but good luck. Good
Right.
luck. And that's a very sad, cynical, nihilistic message. And I'm able to see a positive technology, truly a tool to help people, and that makes me very hopeful. So, yeah, for whether for the third world neighbor or whether the neighbor, in the bedroom next door, it's a very hopeful thing.
And again, that's
Well,
a hope for today, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
it's a hope for tomorrow, but it's a present feeling, present experience of hope today.
it's here now. Yeah, that's actually why I keep track of the home I'm looking at right now. I keep track of that home priced in Bitcoin. It's gone in 4.5 years. It's gone down 86% when priced in Bitcoin. I mean, I think I can say that, and people can say that's a lot, and yet that you can't even hardly get your brain around it
Right.
because we're not used to homes going down in
In
value
anything.
in anything. They just go up and up and up, much less. Notice I didn't say it went down 20%. That in some ways would almost be easier to get our heads around, but to say that it's gone down 86% when priced in Bitcoin. Now go back again to that 22-year-old, my son, a year from now, when he graduates and maybe gets a first job somewhere. Like literally, hey, what? And you're not married yet? By the way, I'd love it if you found a girl and got married soon. I would love that. I would love that. The right
Grandkids.
girl, I would support that. But if he's not there yet, I can literally say, what's the best paying job you can get? And what's the cheapest accommodations you can get so that you could really sock away some funds, in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years by yourself. Again, this house has dropped 86%. And our Bitcoin bull run here has kind of stalled out in the last 4 months. I suspect that in a few months time rather, that 86% is going to pale in comparison to the new numbers I might be able to offer. So, yeah, very hopeful savings technology.
So I think we'll end it here. But if there's anything too, you're listening to this and you're in this, I'd be curious, what do you see as the most important or the most valuable thing Bitcoin offers for you today? So feel free to leave that down there if you think we missed a giant one. But then also, if you're listening, what sort of things do you wish we would have talked about as far as what is Bitcoin valuable for today, right? So we didn't talk about spending it. We didn't talk about the ways in which the mining is doing things for renewable energy for third world countries. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff we didn't even touch on today. So I'd be curious what you would like us to talk about as well. But I think that's all that we have for you this day. So wherever you are, as someone I listen to says, go and make it a great day. We'll catch you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared.
Absolutely.